I'm your visiting artist today. My name is Abigail Wombolt. I'm coming to you from my home studio. I have two studios, very lucky. I have a room in my house where I do kind of the cleaner work, some drawing, some acrylic painting or watercolor painting. I also have a mill studio over in Central Falls where I get to make a mess. I get to use my saw and do some woodwork, and I get to do oil painting. I do a lot of large-scale oil paintings. I have a BFA in drawing and painting and an MFA in painting. I am also a teacher. I have taught and teach at many universities around New England and colleges. I have in fact taught at RISD in the past. I paint out of a memory of a sensation or from visual material that manifests itself in my imagination. If I have a need for a more realistic resolution, I will work from personal photographs that I have taken, or I will employ a model or work for myself. I'm really interested in multiple layers in an image. I don't just want someone to look at a painting and immediately know what's going on. I want them to have to dig it out. And I really like the juxtaposition of kind of decadent beauty with a sort of grit. And I want someone to realize that the subject that they're looking at is more complicated and maybe a little more shocking the longer they look at the piece. I sometimes break the frame and work into 3 dimensions. Here you can see I'm working on a large-scale installation. This installation hung at the Dirt Palace for a month in Olneyville in Providence. It had plaster, fabric. I built this almost like a garden box in the bottom, which I filled with dirt and grass seed. This installation was called Stranger Things Than Wonderland. It was all about innocence versus ignorance. These are a little series of studies I did of facial features, and I really like to do portraiture, figurative work, and facial features on my own time, just to continue to gain knowledge of the figure so that when I do go and work abstractly, I have a real understanding of form. This is our generous model, JJ. I have set her up with a natural light source, so I have the light coming from the window, and we have this wonderful highlight on the side of her face, and then also this great cast shadow on the chair. I'm also really interested in the composition that's being created here with the 3 ovals of her shoulders, head, and the back of the chair. And I've created a really strong contrast through choosing to have a dark fabric on the wall and have her wear a really white t-shirt. You can tell she's starting to get annoyed with me because I'm talking so much and telling her what to do here. Move on. So I'll move on to the drawing. I'm going to be doing a portrait because I hear that's what you guys are doing for your final. So I'm just starting with basic proportions. I'm establishing the central axis of the head, a gestural oval, just sort of to get my basic shape down. I'm placing the eyes, remember, always in the center of the head, and then the nose and the mouth, nose halfway between the chin and the eyes, and the mouth halfway between the nose and the chin is a good rule of thumb for starting. Also remember, when you get to the neck, it has that pop. The neck muscle has that pop. So many people make these indented necks when they're first doing a portrait. Really look for that pop in the neck muscle. Relationships are the most important thing about drawing. When you're trying to establish your underdrawing, establish your structure, and establish where things are correctly, you don't want to worry about making the eye just like your eye or the nose just like your nose. You want to worry about the distance between the eye and the nose, or where the value is falling, the shape of the value falling on the face. If you can concentrate on the shapes and the proportions and the distances of things, the relationships within the drawing, ultimately it's going to be much stronger. You can see I'm starting to put in a little bit of value structure now. I am doing my underdrawing in Vine Charcoal. Conte is a very waxy medium, and if you overwork it too much on the paper, after taking it off once or twice with the eraser, it really leaves this film And it's really hard to get back down to the white of the paper, and also it doesn't hold the material as well. So I like to do an underdrawing in Vine charcoal if I'm doing a longer investment with Conte. You can see I'm putting in my value structure now. I'm looking for the lights and darks. A few other materials I use in here. I'm going to use Vine charcoal. I use Conte, black Conte. I do use a tiny bit of white Conte at the end just to kind of punch some of my highlights. I use a Q-tip instead of a blending stump. I've always hated blending stumps. I feel like the rubbing of the paper on paper, for some reason, it really bothers me. And I've always liked to use my hand to get as close to the paper as possible. You'll also see me use a paintbrush at 2 different points during this drawing. The first one is I use a really nice watercolor brush just to sort of blend a little bit. So I don't want to wipe as much of the charcoal off. And sometimes the paintbrush, it can be a really nice way just to sort of lift a little of the charcoal or blend a little of the charcoal without having it all just walk off the paper. Later you'll see me use it again, just briefly when I add a little water to it. And with the Conte, I use it with the Conte just to wet the back a little bit where the background is really dark, and a little bit in the hair where it gets really dark. And then once it dries, you can go back over it and you get some really rich blacks that way. Teacher always used to say that drawing takes the time it takes. And a lot of people want this kind of immediate gratification. They want the drawing to be done in an hour. It might take you 3-6 days to do a drawing. This is the same teacher, of course, who used to say you're not really drawing unless your fingers are bleeding. But he was great. He was my favorite. Seemed like a lot of work to do an entire underdrawing in Vine charcoal first and then to go back over it in Conte. But as I'm going in now, I can start with my Conte to go to the darkest darks first, My structure is all there. I don't have to worry about establishing relationships or proportion. My form is sound. And the great thing about having such sound form is now I can get into details with the Conte. If you try and get into detail before your form is sound, it doesn't matter how much you tickle it, it's just never going to feel structurally strong. It's always going to feel a little off, a little wonky. So here we have day 2. You can see I have to work from photographs now. My model has abandoned me, but that's okay. Sometimes when you first go into the Conte, it can be a little nerve-wracking because you really are losing everything you found with the vine. You're kind of wiping it away as you go. And yes, you have this sort of ghost to work with, but it's just a different material now going down. It's much darker. People get scared at this point, and if you are ever making a portrait where you're doing your underdrawing first, just be aware that as you work on it more with the vine, it's all there. You figured it out with the charcoal, and you shouldn't worry too much about it. You'll be able to dig it out again. Ready to work on the hair, you want to start with a big basic shape. Everyone wants to go right for the detail, draw every strand of hair. Even if your hair is curly, don't do these loop-de-loops. Really just start broadly, and then you can go in and pull away the highlights and put in the darker shadows. Since I hear you guys have ink, you can do the real dark areas with a little bit of ink and really create some dynamic depth. Every artist brings something different to a portrait. My people are always somber, intense, probably in stark contradiction to what people think my portraits will be like upon meeting me. You might think about what your portrait shows, what you bring out of your viewer, your sitter, or yourself. For joining me today. I hope you enjoyed my portrait demonstration, and all the best with your finals.